I'm not spending more than 20 minutes on this. So last month I ran a 1:12 half marathon, and that puts me roughly in the top 0.1% to 0.5% of all finishers. I think the median finishing time for a half marathon is around 1:50 to 2:13, and I ran a 1:12. And I think one of the things to consider is I'm not primarily a runner. I'm a triathlete, so I swim, I bike, and then I run. So in this video today, I'm going to quickly break down how does someone that's training across all three sports prepare, what do they do in their training, and how does it came about that I ran a 1:12 half marathon while being a triathlete. So first off, a little bit of context about who I am. My name's Adam Ward. I'm an ex-international cyclist. I competed from the ages of 12 up to I was 22. I represented Ireland at European and World Championships. I raced in Europe, across all of Europe. I raced in Spain, France, Italy, and I have competed against some of the top World Tour cyclists in the sport today. In 2022, I took a break from cycling. I stepped away from the sport. And then in 2023, I started doing triathlons just for fun to begin with. I found very quickly that the triathlon brought back that competitive edge, and that it was something that I wanted to maybe pursue more seriously. And I'm at the stage now where I really feel like I'm just on the edge of being able to take my professional license in triathlon. That's for 70.3 distance. I also run a coaching business where I help people, amateur triathletes, build their training plans, prepare for race day. It really is a full scope approach that I use with my athletes. And I think out of anyone out there, I'm more qualified than most in terms of triathlon, because I am someone that has actually walked the walk. In 2023, I came new to triathlon. I had never swam, had never run properly before, only bike. And so I had to basically teach myself two new sports, had to take a completely new training methodology, a new approach to training. And I feel like whenever I got through the other end of that and I found some success in the sport, I think that I do a really good job of helping people, and I can relate to people that are new to triathlon because I was there myself not that long ago. So the half marathon that I ran was in Oma. It was Oma half marathon. It was 2 weeks ago. The conditions on the day were not great, which is good and bad, because it would maybe indicate that I could have maybe went a little bit faster or could have brought the time down. It was a really windy and rainy day. I think the forecast going into it was a lot worse than what we actually got on the day. It wasn't too cold, it was wet, the conditions were wet, but the wind wasn't such a big factor that I thought it would be on race day. I felt quite good going into the race. I think I entered it around 6 months ago whenever entries first opened, so this is something that's been on my Training Peaks calendar for a long time. It's a race that I do every year if I can. I think I've done it for the last 2 or 3 years in a row now, and I always think an early spring half marathon, it's really good if you've got a 70.3 coming up during the summer, because it gives you a really good indication of where your run fitness is at. And I directly use my spring fresh half marathon time to indicate or to determine how I'm going to pace those half marathons off the bike then in the summertime. But I felt quite good. My running has been something that I've been working on quite hard for the last year. In the last 6 months, I've been taking my swimming more seriously alongside my run too. And I think my volume coming into the half marathon was around 50 to 60 kilometers a week for the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks leading into it. I think in triathlon it's very hard to periodize your training correctly, and I think you'll go through phases in your training. I certainly do, where I'll focus more on one sport than the other. To be honest, in the 6 to 8 weeks leading up to this race, I was really focused on my running. I really wanted to run well, and so that if life came up, if I was busy with work, if I had something going on, I made sure that the run was the one thing that I did get in that day, and that I spaced them out throughout the week, and that the run was the one thing that was a staple over the 6 to 8 weeks. And that meant that I just made sure that my run mileage was there. Maybe if my swim and bike volume, those were the first things that were going to suffer. I made a conscious decision to focus on my run workouts for the 6 to 8 weeks leading into it. I think for me, the way that I approach this is running mileage is something that me and my coach have been very careful when approaching it. I think last year I really thrived on, or I got around 30 to 40 kilometers a week, and I've taken almost 4 minutes off my half marathon time just by bumping that up by 10 to 15, 20 kilometers a week more. With run mileage, it's the one thing that you want to be careful around increasing your volume. Just doing more because you can do more doesn't always mean you're going to get faster. For me, I really try and get the most out of one level of training or a certain mileage number or a certain volume per week, and really make sure that we're extracting all the gains that we can from it, and then gradually pumping it up and getting used to doing a little bit more after that. I think the problem of coming to running and triathlon as a cyclist, they're not the problem, but it's good and bad. Whereas like I definitely do have the aerobic base, like I've got the aerobic fitness, it was there. But with running specifically, is because it's a high impact sport. I never really did it when I was younger, and it's something that if you increase the run mileage too fast, and if you're training in the wrong zones, if you're running too quick, if you're doing too many miles, your run is the thing that's gonna hurt you. You know what I mean? You're gonna get injured. I did, whenever I started running, I had a lot of it bother with injuries, which was almost frustrating because I was able to run fast. So I had the aerobic engine there. I was able to, I think one of my first ever 5Ks that I did a little bit of training for, I ran in 17:20 or something like that. And that gave me a lot of confidence, but it was probably the wrong thing that I needed, because I thought that now I'm a 17-minute 5K runner, when really I had the aerobic base of a 17-minute 5K runner, but I hadn't actually done the proper groundwork in the sport to get there. So it meant that I didn't really have the proper base mileage there. It meant that I was just putting too much stress on my body by running too fast, by doing speed workouts, by going to the track. And it meant that I was getting a lot of bother in my ankles, in my hips, in my knees, and in my IT bands as well. So that's almost more frustrating whenever you know that you can run fast, but your body doesn't let you because you keep getting injured. And that's something that I've learned to manage over time. I even find in the winter time where I'm doing longer aerobic runs, and you almost can feel it in your body that you can run faster. And it's just that sort of, what's the word? It's that kind of mental fortitude, or that sort of mental strength that you just stick to your zone, stay where you need to be, and it'll all pay off whenever that race day comes. And I actually think that is something that a lot of runners that I talk to, or triathletes or athletes that approach me for coaching, it's something that a lot of people definitely struggle with. I feel there's a lot of reasons why people get into the sport, why they get into running and triathlon specifically, is you want to get a workout in, you want to work hard, you want to go out, and you want to release some stress and blow off some steam. And I think by doing that sometimes is you're going out there and you're maybe running in zone 3 or pushing into zone 4, and you're out of breath, and if you're out running with someone, you know, you're going too hard to have a conversation. But really it's that 80-20 rule split up is really where you want to begin. It's just about doing the basics right, and then the speed will come after that. But really, I think personally something that really stuck with me is I have a close friend who's a marathon runner, and I've spoken to him and I follow him on social media, and he was always posting and talking about how a lot of his running and a lot of his training was all base mile steady zone 2 stuff until he was up to 100 miles a week. And that's when he would introduce some tempo sessions, some hill reps and stuff like that. And I think that's something, there's some learning in that, where if there's people that are running a 2:20 marathon or they're running a 15-minute 5K, and those guys aren't looking towards doing speed sessions or track sessions, or they're not blasting out VO2 work, then it tells you something about how people that are doing less run volume, or people that are juggling the 3 sports, about how they should be structuring their training as well. And I think for running, it's just something that I would much rather go into a race with a little bit less fitness. I would much rather go into a race with a little less run volume in the legs and actually be able to do it and get the effort out and actually finish the race, rather than showing up injured or not being able to train or not being able to walk properly either. I think that's the one thing, you know, in triathlon, of course, if you pick up a run injury or a run niggle, you can go to the pool or you can ride your bike instead most of the time. But really, running is part of a triathlon race, and it's arguably the hardest. And one of the biggest things that you need to prioritize is just making sure that you stay uninjured and you stay healthy. And if you can do that, is half the battle, you know what I mean? And it's something that it's easy to forget whenever you're not injured, but it's something that really should be a priority. Even whenever things are going well, you need to think about, what if I get injured, or is this going to make me injured, or am I doing the right supplementary exercises to make sure everything's okay? Have I increased my volume enough? Am I making a big, huge jump in my training volume? Is this risky? Is going for this long run going to affect me? Or even just checking in with yourself when you're running. How am I feeling now? Do I feel sore? Should I cut this run short? That's something that if you feel any discomfort, and the best thing that I can do for athletes that I coach is teach you to learn more about yourself. That's really what I would want. After I work with someone for 90 days, I would really hope that they're in a better position where they can understand their own body, they understand their own training. And effectively, my job as a coach is not to work with someone forever. I would really like to work with someone and have them in a better position where they can make own decisions about their training, and they're maybe relying on me more so for the training plan side of things, and maybe some accountability, maybe to ask questions around pacing or equipment, or just use my experience that I've got over the years, more so than me telling you exactly what zones to do or exactly what training. Those are the athletes that always do the best, are the people that are able to take a little bit of initiative in their training, and you only do that through experience, you only do that through feeling forward, and I think I'm in a position where I have definitely failed forward. So I just needed to check that the camera was still running. It is, thankfully. But yeah, back to the 112 that I ran. I think last year I ran a 1:15:40, and after that, in the same race, that kind of determined what I thought I could do off the bike in a 70.3, which was around 2 or 3 minutes slower than that. I think I ran a 1:17 or 1:18 off the bike at the national championships last year. And the 112 it wasn't so much about the number for me, it was more so the pace that I was able to hold. Last year, essentially, I went out at 3:35 minute kilometers, which works out at around 18-minute 5Ks. And this year, I thought 3:25 was doable, and it's a pace and it's a number that I had in my mind for a long time. Even in the run into this, I thought it was definitely doable, just based on my numbers in training, what I was hitting, and my run mileage, the amount of volume that I'd done over the winter in the pool and the bike. I thought that a 112 was definitely doable. And I think whenever I came across the line and I finished, I think I did a 112:02 or 07. It was in around there, where I was close to getting into the 111s. And I think if you look at the course and the elevation that I did, I think on a better day, I definitely could have broke into the 111s, which is really good. And I think as well, the reason why I came up with the 112 number is last year at the same race, 112 was on the podium. But then again, with the talent in Northern Ireland and running, it really just depends on who turns up to the race. Again, a 112 was good enough to get on the podium last year, but this year a 112 just had me in 7th place. So it really just depends on who turns up. I think the winner was 67 or 68 minutes this year, so I have a little bit of time to lose to get to the win if I'm going to go up against those guys, but I always look at the podium in a big race, and I think that's something that I definitely want to do in the future, even as a side goal around 70.3 in triathlon racing. Something as well that I did coming into this race was I used beetroot powder. Ox is a brand that I have used them for a while. This is not a sponsored video, and I don't have a partnership with those guys. I just believe it's a good product, and it's something that I use. And I try to phase in around 7 days before a big race day. So if I'm doing a 70.3 or a big race, a big triathlon, I will supplement and phase in and cycle beetroot powder essentially. There's a couple of different uses and there's a lot of different science based on how you should use it. But essentially, it's you take 1 or 2 scoops a day for 7 days, and then around 3 or 4 hours before the race, you take 2 scoops. And essentially, I find that it definitely feels like it helps out. There's been a lot of studies about beetroot and its ability to enhance performance in endurance athletes, specifically in VO2 and oxygen uptake. And it just gives me a little bit of an edge for race day that I like to keep around. So that's one thing I did. And then I also used the Morton bicarb. That's something that I had never used before. Even as a cyclist, I never tried a bicarb before. Had never really used it before, and it was something that I knew that this was a race that I really wanted to give a good shot, and so I decided to go for the Morton bicarb. They've got a list of different products and different ways to use it. It really depends on your body weight as well in terms of how much you can take, but that's something that I used on race morning. But I was also very careful not to have something brand new on race day. The race is on Sunday. I tried it out on the Tuesday because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't having any bad GI issues. I wanted to test it out, feel the effects, making sure that it wasn't something brand new on race day. So that's another tip for you, is making sure that if you're going to use a supplement, you're going to use a gel, you're going to use a certain kind of product like bicarb, make sure that you test it out prior to race day, because that's super important. And you really don't want to have GI issues or stomach issues and impact your performance and impact your race because you've tried something new and it's just backfired on you essentially. But in terms of how the race actually went, it was a really good scenario for me. I think I started off the race and I was around 10th position, and that's basically where I started. And there was 2 groups that started to form. Obviously there were the guys in the top 3, they took off, they were really quick, and then there was a smaller group that formed behind in around the 5th to 10th place. And to be honest, the group was a little bit too fast. It was a little bit uncomfortable for me in the first couple of kilometers, but I was caught between a rock and a hard place, because I was like, do I just go out here whenever the conditions are windy, whenever the conditions are difficult, and stay with this group? Or do I run on my own and, you know, face a much difficult task of trying to combat the elements, combat the weather in between these two groups? So I decided to go with the group and really keep in tune with how I was feeling. You know what I mean? It's good to have some feet to run off, but I was really making sure that I wasn't pushing too far into the red. So in the first couple of kilometers, I thought, okay, I'll go with this group. I'll see if I can get into a rhythm. And basically that's what happened. I went with a group of guys that were running around 325s, a little bit quicker than that. And that's like where I was getting a little bit uncomfortable, because I had the goal of doing it, of running 325s for the most of it. And we were drifting a little bit faster than that, only by a few seconds. But I thought it was a little bit too early in the race to be pushing. Those first couple of kilometers of the race are also very hilly. So I went with the group, and then I kind of lost them on a few hills. And then I started to bring them back on some flats and downhills. And then eventually the race just strung out then as we got to the halfway point. And I think I found myself in 10th or 11th place around halfway into the race. And I just knew from previous experience that the last kind of 5k or 6k of the race are super, super hard and super hilly. And I have went in there and I've got to the back quarter of this half marathon course before, having gone too deep into the red. And I just knew that was something that I really did not want to do this time around. And I got it right last year, and I made sure that I did the same tactic this year again, where I ran a hard, good, steady race for the first half and then into the second, third. And then with around the third left, just around 5-6k point, that is where I basically wanted to turn up the volume and really make sure that I finished fast. And I found from previous years, from the 10-mile point to the finish, that is where a lot of guys really find it difficult and start to die out. And I think that I passed maybe 3 people in the last kind of 5k, and that's basically how I went from being outside the top 10 to into 7th place and kind of only 2 places away from the prizes. It just kind of shows you that if I had followed that group, there was guys in that group that took off and that I lost in the first half of the race that I actually ended up finishing in front of, because I had a plan in mind. I knew the course, I knew what pacing strategy I wanted to do, and I executed my own race how I wanted to race it, and I was rewarded for that, rather than trying to stick with a group, going with a group that's too fast, going into the red just because you're trying to follow some heels. Like, again, running is an individual sport. You can follow a group. You really want to be in tune with how you're feeling. You don't want to dig too deep too fast, because it really will bite you in the back half. And I made sure that I didn't want to do it. And I think the best way to learn that lesson is maybe to miss pace or to start too hard in a race. And then you'll very quickly find out that you never want to do it again, because there's nothing worse than dying out really badly in the last 5k of a race and just crawling home. It's not a good position you want to be in. It's something I've done, and you want to basically do everything you can to pace smartly and make sure that you get everything out in the last quarter or the last third of the race. Yeah, look, I think I've touched on a few different things in this video, and hopefully you find some value in it. Hopefully you've learned from my own experience and how my training looks and what I've done in preparation for running a half marathon PB. I'm going to try and make more videos like this. I'm very active on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at 80xmward. That's just Adam Ward, but the second A is an X. I'm active on there. I post a lot of stuff on there. I try and post at least once a day, but I'm also trying to make more YouTube content around training, around trying to get my 70.3 Pro card, and basically just helping you guys out if there's anything that you need, or a specific topic you want me to cover, or if you want me to break down something, I'd be more than happy to do it. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for watching the video, and make sure you drop a like and subscribe. And if there's anything that I can help you with in the comments, or you want to maybe work with me, drop me a follow over Instagram, look at some of my content, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.